This is our scripture time. This is the second sermon on this series called Face to Face with Jesus. We are studying some encounters that people had with Jesus and extracting lessons about that. So this is the second message, and today our text is Mark chapter 5, verses 1 to 20. So let's go to the text, Mark chapter 5. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains. But he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told in the city and in the country, and people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. And he was getting into the boat. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. It's quite an impressive story we have here. And it's important for us to understand this story in the context of the Gospel of Mark. Because, each one of the Gospels, they were written for different purposes. They were written for different people in different contexts. people with different backgrounds. When you go to the Gospel of Matthew, for example, you understand and you see that this Gospel was written for a Jewish audience. The intention of Mark was to present Jesus as the Messiah, the promised Messiah, because he was talking to Jews. But Mark is different. The scholars say that Mark was probably in Rome when he wrote this story, the Gospel. And he wrote for a Gentile audience, different from Matthew. People that were reading this Gospel, they were like Romans. Many of them, they knew very well the structure of Rome. And the purpose of this Gospel is presented in the first verse, when he says, the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Mark was trying to present Jesus as the Son of God to these people. And many of them, they recognized Cesar, the emperor, as the Son of God. But Mark is saying, hey, Cesar is not the Son of God. Jesus of Nazareth is the Son of God. And we can see that in the first part of Mark, he emphasizes the authority of Jesus over everything and everyone. Because this was what Cesar had, authority, power. And Mark is emphasizing miracles and stories that show the great power of Jesus. In the second part of the Gospel, Mark changes. And he starts saying how Jesus exercises his authority. Because although Jesus is the all-powerful, almighty Son of God, he exercises his authority not as in a way of dominion, but in a way of service. He is a humble servant. Different, totally different from what the Romans knew. For the Romans, authority and power was equal, dominion. But Mark is presenting the real Son of God as the one who came to serve. So the second part of this gospel shows Jesus as a humble servant. So the passage we just read is located in this first part of the gospel, where Mark is trying to show Jesus' authority over everything. Specifically, this part here in chapter 5, we are in the middle of a section where Mark shows or brings 4 different stories. And all of them show the same thing, Jesus' authority over everything. We have the story in Mark chapter 4 when Jesus calms a storm. Forces of nature. Jesus has control of it. Then we have this incident that we just read, chapter 5. Jesus has authority over the forces of evil. And then we have another incident with a woman that had an incurable disease. And Jesus has authority over that. And at the end, we also have the incident when Jesus resurrected a 12-year-old girl. And Jesus shows his authority over death. So we have all these stories connected, and there is one big theme around them. In all those stories, we have a situation out of control. A situation that no man was able to manage. The 4 stories, they bring a situation out of control. And in this situation where we read today here, chapter 5, with this man, the situation is very clear. You see here a man out of control. The text says, verse 2, a man with an unclean spirit. And this brings our understanding. We can understand here that the situation was not explained by any human category. This was not something that a psychologist could explain. We cannot understand that in like a sociological category or any other human or science category. No. The explanation for that situation is only found on a spiritual font. A man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and nobody lived among the tombs. Reading this, I can remember many movies about zombies. This man was like a zombie. He was dead, but at the same time, he was alive. He lived among the tombs. No one could bind him. He was out of control. Nobody had the power to tame him. He was hurting others. But more than that, the text says that he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. The situation was out of control, not only for others, but also for himself. He was in a path of self-destruction. He was powerful. Nobody could, bind him. But at the same time, he himself could not control himself. And the explanation is there in this short answer. When Jesus asked his name, he said, "My name is Legion." There was a confusion. Of course, the name of this man was not Legion. But the devil had entered his life and took control of his life in such a way that he had lost not only control, but also his identity. He was confused. A legion was like a big division in the Roman army. 6,000 soldiers. It seems there were many, many demons living with these men. And the situation of these men out of control leads us to think about ourselves. And the question I have here is, have you lost control of yourself? I'm not asking if you are possessed with a demon. No, I'm asking, have you lost control of yourself? Maybe you lost control of your emotions, you cannot control them anymore. Maybe you lost control of your greed. You are ambitious. Maybe money. You lost control of your finances. Or you lost control of your shopping. Or sex. Or your tongue. You don't control your speaking anymore. Maybe drugs, addictions. It's not difficult to lose control of yourself. It's not difficult. And when I read this story, there is a word here that is very interesting, because the text says in verse 3 that he lived among the tombs and no one could bind him anymore. There is this expression, anymore. And I understand reading that there was a time when people could do that. When people could bind him. When the situation was bad but was under control. But then the situation was becoming little by little out of control. And then this man was now totally out of control. Which teaches me that this was a process. I remember and we discovered today that Todd's favorite movie is Lord of the Rings, right? Lord of the Rings is a movie that brings this character called Gollum. It's very interesting to learn the history, the story. And my question here is, how did he get there? Because Gollum was not Gollum forever. He became Gollum. He was Smeagol. Thank you, my friend. He was Smeagol before being Gollum. And I was looking at the internet some description of this character. And I found this. I'd like to read this short description of Gollum. Gollum was once a good hobbit named Smeagol. And this past identity comes to represent Gollum's good side, the part of him that loves and wants to help his master, Frodo. However, Smeagol, the hobbit, had a glaring weakness. During a fishing trip, his companion found the ring in the water, and Smeagol wanted it so much that he killed the other hobbit to get it. This heinous act eventually transformed Smeagol into the slimy, hunched Gollum who follows Frodo. Gollum, the dark side of Smeagol, covets the ring which he calls my precious. So much that he is willing to kill for it again. Gollum and Smeagol struggle with each other, often arguing about what course of action to take and how far to go to gain possession of the ring. The evil Gollum side usually wins. And in the trilogy, Gollum serves as a symbol of how the ring can transform a basically decent person into a dirty, smelly swamp creature. When I read that description, I remember this man in Mark chapter 5. And I can't suppose that this was not like repent, like in a instant, right? It was a process. Maybe he was like Smeagol, but he opened a door to the evil, to the devil in his life. And there is a quote that says that the more you try to control something, the more it controls you. It's interesting that when we desire control, when this becomes our ambition, the consequence of that is that we lose control of our desire to take control. And this is how the devil works in our lives. And here then we have this situation out of control. And I remember, and I can think about our situations in our lives, situations when we lose control. Have you lost control in your life? Then, the question we have here is good for you and good for me. And the question of this sermon is, what happens when the uncontrolled evil is face to face with the irresistible Jesus? Think about that. We have an encounter here. The devil, uncontrolled evil. Nobody could control him. He meets the irresistible Jesus. And the text says here, what happens when this meeting, this encounter happens here. Verse 6 and 7 says, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, what have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me. It doesn't seem something uncontrolled, right? When we read this, I see, no, it's not so bad, this guy. Where is your strength? Where is your courage? Nobody can take control of you. But then he comes and fell down. And more than that, he recognizes Jesus. He says, Jesus, you are the Son of the Most High God. It's crazy to think that the devil has a good theology, right? At least here. And more than that, the devil calls God's name. I adjure you by God. Wow. And this is interesting because a way that when you go to the ancient literature, there are many stories of exorcisms. And the way that the pagans used to exorcise demons was by calling highest power. They need to call something that were, or someone superior. And the demon is doing this here. I adjure you by God. I call in a highest power. And it's interesting that Jesus doesn't do that. In any moment, Jesus comes, I exorcise you in the name of, no. It's just myself. Because Jesus was the highest power. And then the text continues and he says, after he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country, verse 10. And then verse 12, and they begged him. It's interesting that sometimes the narrative brings he, and sometimes the narrative brings they. There was a confusion, multiple personalities. But the fact, and I think this is very interesting, the verb beg, to beg. It's interesting that someone that is out of control is begging Jesus something. Imploring. It's not just asking. It's begging, imploring. And then, at the end, we see what happened. Verse 15 says, they came to Jesus, and people from the city, they came. I will talk more about that in a minute. They came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, and see the contrast, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. The contrast is clear. He was not sitting before. He was naked before. The Gospel of Luke says that. And he was out of his mind. But now Jesus brought the uncontrolled under his control. I don't know if you saw like shows that brings like this before and after. I found one of these images on the internet. Cristiano Ronaldo before and after. Before, $1 million, millions of dollars, and after, millions of dollars. But what is interesting here is that this is not real transformation. This is just a style makeover. And the transformation we are seeing here in the Bible is not just a makeover. No, it's a real transformation from inside out. The demons were inside of them. His behavior was just a reflex, a manifestation of who he had become inside. And then we see this totally controlled situation here. And then you ask, what can we learn with that? What can we learn about Jesus? I'd like to propose on one hand, 3 things we can learn with Jesus or about Jesus here. And then some things we can learn about the evil, about evil. Number 1, we learn about Jesus' absolute authority over the uncontrolled forces of evil. He subdues the one that none could control. Maybe you have in your life an evil force controlling you. But let me say something. It's uncontrolled. It's out of your control. But it's not out of God's control. God can control what is uncontrolled in your life. This is the first thing. Jesus' absolute authority over the uncontrolled forces of evil. The first lesson we have here. And maybe you came here today to hear that. Maybe you are out of control in your life, in some areas. But hear that. Jesus can control that. The second thing we learn about Jesus is his compassion toward the man. And I love this. Because Jesus sees a man where everyone saw only a monster. Despite all circumstances, this man, under this dominion of evil, he was a man made in God's image. And Jesus could see him. And where everyone was seeing a monster, Jesus could see beyond that a man. And I think this is special because sometimes we lose our identity and people see us only in our evil mode, in our dark side, and they bring like labels on us, maybe on you. But what we see here is that when Jesus sees you, he sees you beyond the label. You are not a monster. You are a person. And Jesus is able to see the person there. Some people say that when Jesus asked, "What's your name?" Jesus was practicing some ritual that people use to exorcise demons, that we need to know the name. It's very common, even today, some preachers or some people think that they need to know the name of the demon. Who are you? Tell your name. And we give microphone to the demon. Tell your name. And they use this text. But I see here, maybe you don't agree with me. But at least when I see that Jesus is doing something totally different from what the pagans did that time. Jesus didn't ask his name to take control of him. No. Jesus asked his name because he knew that beyond that legion was a man with a name, with a story. Jesus was restoring his name, his identity. Jesus' compassion toward the man. And then the third lesson about Jesus is his power to restore a lost identity. It's wonderful how Jesus is the only one able to destroy the evil without destroying the evildoer. Years ago, my auntie in Brazil had a brain tumor. And she looked for help, doctors. And she knew that there was just one doctor in Brazil who was able to remove the tumor without killing her. Because the tumor was in a very, very, very delicate place in her brain. And there were high chances that removing the tumor, they were also killing her. But this doctor was the only one who had the ability, the skills, to remove the tumor without killing her. And I love this story because it reminds me about Jesus here. Jesus is able to clean this man, to separate what he was not able to separate anymore, good and evil. He was not able to restore God's image in himself. And this is us. We are lost without Jesus. But when Jesus comes into our lives, he is able to clean us, to save us. Maybe you have come to say, no, there is no solution for me. There is no solution for my compulsion. There is no solution for my behavior. I lost my identity. But Jesus is able to go there and to restore your identity. He is the only one who has this power. And then it's interesting that the devil asks, please, send us to the pigs. And I don't know about you, but I always ask myself about this. Why pigs? Why not cow? Why not birds? Why pigs? And I see here something very interesting because, of course, this was not a Jewish village. Because for the Jewish people, pigs were unclean animals. And it's interesting that Jesus is saying, hey, devil, Satan, your place is not with people, is not with men and women made in God's image. You are unclean, so go to what is unclean. So Jesus is clearly establishing here value. If you need to decide between pigs and a man, you go with the man. And this is beautiful And you say, oh, but this is obvious. No, it's not. And I'll show you right now why it's not obvious. And after these 3 lessons, we still have like very short lessons here about how evil works. What can we learn about evil? We have this truth that evil has many faces. When we read this story, we see evil not only in this uncontrolled man, this demon-possessed man, this wild beast. No. We also see evil in the reaction of their own, the village there. You see verse 14 and 15. And people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man sitting there, clothed in his right mind. And they were afraid. It's interesting. They were not afraid before. They were not afraid of this beast, this wild man, uncontrolled man. No, they were afraid now that the man was healed. And we can understand that they were afraid of Jesus. And the text continues saying that, verse 16 and 17, that those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. In other words, what they said to Jesus revealed the evilness of his heart, of their heart, because they were saying, Jesus, do not disturb. We were in peace here with this guy. We can handle it. Then you brought disruption here in our village. Do not disturb. And we can say, first, do not disturb, they were saying, our economy. Because they were sad, because they lost their pigs. They preferred a demon-possessed man, uncontrolled, than losing their pigs. It's crazy. They value pigs over a person. When evil takes control of our lives, evil inverts our priorities and values. And you say, no, this is unbelievable. Someone valuing a pig over a person. But let's talk about money. Because for them, pigs were money, economy. Do you really value people above your money? Let's think about our values in our culture. Let's think about how evil our society is with values. And we despise people to get something else. Do not disturb our economy, Jesus. The second place, and I don't have more time. Do not disturb our conscience, Jesus. You know why? Because they needed someone evil to blame. While we have someone who is evil, it's very convenient to us to blame someone else. It's convenient to have evil people around us because we can blame and we can give an excuse to ourselves and to say, oh, we are good. We are not like this one. It's convenient to have someone evil like a politician to blame. It's convenient to blame a boss or a colleague or a wife or a husband. It's convenient to blame someone who is a troublemaker in our society. Before Jesus coming to this place, they had a good excuse for themselves. I could say that every problem they had, they would say, oh, this is the crazy man in the tombs. He is the guy. He is the problem. But when Jesus comes and cleans these men, they have no excuse anymore. And they need to see their own evilness inside their hearts. Jesus unmasked that village. Do not disturb our conscience. And let us see, do not disturb our status quo. Hey, Jesus, who are you? We live here with this guy for years and years and years. You don't know nothing about us, our village. We have a way, a standard. We have our crazy people. We deal with that. And you came and you disturbed us, our peace, our status quo. And this reaction is very common because we don't like changes. There is this quote that says, it was not the world being round that agitated people, but that the world wasn't flat. We are open to new things since the new things doesn't change too much our lives. Do not disturb our status quo, Jesus. So these three things here, do not disturb our economy, our conscience, and our status quo, reveals how that society was evil like these men, in the same way. So we have an individual completely controlled by evil, and we have a society that apparently was good. But Jesus is revealing that evil has many faces. Evil doesn't appear only like this wild beast. Sometimes evil appears in a promotion you receive in your job. Evil appears with good opportunities. And then you need to have conscience about your own evilness and ask for God's help. I'd like to finish. I don't have more time. And I'd like to finish with this surprise. The text is incredible. Mark brings something absolutely unpredictable at the end. Because if you read the story, you see three pleas in this story. First one, the demons said, they begged him saying, send us to the pigs. Let us enter them. And what was the answer of Jesus? Jesus said yes or no? Yes. Okay, pigs. Okay. Go there. I allow you. Go there, demons. Jesus said yes to the demons. Please understand this quote in the context, right? Because later you can took the sermon in YouTube, you quote this sentence, and then I became a heretic, right? Please. And the second, see the population of this place, the village. They began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. They said, hey, Jesus, please go. I implore you, go home, Jesus. And what Jesus said? Yes or no? Yes. Jesus said, okay, you don't want me here? I'll go. I'll go. And Jesus went. Jesus said yes to these people. And then we have the third plea. The man who had been possessed with demons begged. See that the verb is the same in the three situations. The man begged him that he might be with him. The man came and said, "Hey, Jesus, let me go with you. I have no more place here. My place is with you. Now I understand who you are. I want to follow you." And then the big surprise. What was Jesus' answer? Oh my. He did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." For me, I don't understand that. Jesus says yes to the demons. Jesus says yes to these people that said, "Do not disturb us." But the man who was transformed, the man who wanted to follow Jesus, Jesus says, "No." Remember that the text, in the context, shows the authority of Jesus over everything and everyone. Jesus has authority even to say no to these men because he has a plan, he has a purpose. And the purpose was that these men could be a witness of Jesus in that place. Every time that these people were looking to these men, they were remembering, "Hey, look at that. This was the man of the tombs. But now, how this happened?" And this man had a chance to say, "Jesus." Sometimes the best place to be is not here where I am right now. Maybe your place is not here. Maybe your place is there in downtown, in your office, with people who are secular, who don't believe in God. And they need someone there to be a witness. And my question is, have you been a witness, salt and light in your village? I cannot go there. I cannot enter in these buildings. But you can go there. And you can be a sign of what God can do in our lives. So this story is about this encounter. It shows the authority of Jesus. It shows the compassion of Jesus. It shows the ability, the skill that Jesus has to restore our identity. But it's also a warning about evil in our lives. So take care, because evil won't come to you just like this wild beast. Evil will come to you in a very, very attractive way. So be aware about the danger of evil in our lives and trust in God.